The assignment is to be the best you can be. The teacher is one of the premier softball coaches in America. Jackie Joseph, head coach of the Michigan State Spartans, explains her time-proven techniques to improve your defense at every position. With just over a decade of head coaching experience, Jackie Joseph has become one of America's top young coaches. She's led Michigan State to its best record and best Big Ten finish in school history. Jackie will show you a thorough overview of proper throwing mechanics and fundamental defense. You'll also see and learn a series of drills to improve both individual and team defense. A USA softball national team coach, an author, and president of the National Fastpitch Coaches Association, Jackie Joseph brings her knowledge and talents to video. Now, Michigan State head coach Jackie Joseph presents Complete Defense for All Positions.
In this tape, we're going to share with you all of the basic fundamentals and mechanics to total team defense. We're going to cover everything from throwing mechanics and fundamentals to basic fielding, ready positions, and some specifics that are particular to each position. We're going to go through catching, pitching, the corners, first and third, and the middle infielders, as well as the outfield. And then lastly, we're going to show you some of the drills that we do on a daily basis that help prepare us to being a very sound defensive team. In teaching the players proper throwing mechanics, it's very important they understand four-seam rotation when they throw. Although there are other types of throws that they'll use in the game, they need to learn the overhand throw and master it first before they move on. In gripping the ball, to begin with, you want to take the middle finger and place it on one of the four seams. Then take the thumb and place it directly opposite that finger. The other two fingers are also on a seam and the pinky just rests. Some players might not have a hand big enough to reach this seam all the way. Keep these fingers on the seam and allow the thumb to then just rest on the ball. Also notice that the ball is not deep in the hand, but it's out in the palm, so there's a space in between. In helping the player understand which seam she should be gripping to learn the overhand throw, the player needs to notice that there are different ways to look at the ball. In looking at the ball this way, she can identify one seam, two seam, three seam, four seam, as opposing the ball like this, where there's one seam, two seams, and then a flat surface. Some coaches actually refer to this as the C or the smile of the ball. In this way, you'd see that the C is actually facing the opposite direction. In either case, you want to hold the ball in this fashion so that the four seams are rotating like this. After we grip the ball with the four seams, we start every day's practice throwing on one knee so the player learns the repetition of proper overhand throwing mechanics. What the upper body does here is you start by taking the thumb down to your short line or your pant line first. Then bring the ball up behind you so that you have a 90-degree angle at your armpit, a 90-degree angle at your elbow, and most importantly, notice that the ball is now facing the opposite direction. Many players, when they bring the ball down or they go in their backswing to throw, they bring the ball and their hand is in this position. So they're pushing the ball rather than using their wrist to throw the ball. Likewise, another common mistake the player will make is they bring the ball back too far behind their head or they wrap it behind their head. Here what we're looking for is bringing the ball straight back so the player can turn and physically look and see the back of their hand. This should be done slowly so the player can master it first before they go on to the next step. From there, the ball's brought forward, leading with the elbow, and the hand is still directly behind the ball. One of the drills that we use the most to teach players how to spin the ball is what we just call a basketball spin drill. Here we have the player stand with the ball directly over their head, using the proper grip, and just spin the ball straight up in the air. This way they can see the proper four-seam rotation and that their hand is behind the ball. The more you can make the ball spin, the faster and farther the ball will travel. We like to place our players on one knee to begin warming up throwing. They're only about 15 or 20 feet apart, and what we're looking for here is that the first few, when the player's learning, that they physically stop and look to see that they can see the back of their hand. Many players can't feel what their hand position is when it's behind their head. Then they can progress on and not have to stop. But if at any time you feel that the player has not muscle memoried that skill, you can stop them and go back and do it again. Notice here as well that the glove hand stretches out toward her target, that the shoulders rotate open and then close, and that after throwing the ball, the arm relaxes and follows through to the opposite side of her body. From that point on, no matter what position the player plays, they need to understand what their feet are doing when they throw. The quicker the feet and the better the feet are in position, the better their arm will be and the more accurate they'll be. It's critical that the back foot is set perpendicular to the target so that the body is physically sideways to whatever target it is. So if I'm throwing here, I'm set up this way. If I'm throwing over there, I'm set up that way. When receiving the ball, it's important that the player move to receive the ball. Many times we see players playing catch, and no matter where the ball is thrown, they just reach for it, instead of moving to get their body in position. The player should move to the ball with two hands to receive the ball. Once they receive the ball, they begin to get the ball into their hand, into the throwing motion, and set their feet into the direction they're going to throw the ball. So if I'm here and I want to throw the ball back to you, I'm going to step to catch the ball, and I'm going to quickly set my feet and get in position to throw. Notice that no matter where I'm going to throw the ball, I'm always sideways to my target before I throw it. Never should we see the players stepping and having open shoulders and open hips to their target. This simple footwork change will immediately cut all of your throwing errors in half. From this position, I can miss high and I can miss low, and I can miss left and I can miss right. By simply turning the body sideways, I've eliminated missing left and right. Here now I can only miss high and low. Very important that you get the feet quickly in position before we throw the ball. In teaching players basic fielding techniques, have the player begin with their feet a little more than shoulder width apart. As with hitting, you want the toes facing forward or slightly in. When we field the ball, we want to make sure that our weight is up on the balls of our feet and not back on our heels. Most players will try to field the ball too far back in their stance. To show a player where to field the ball, have them simply bend over and reach out and mark an X in the dirt as far out as they can reach. That is the actual location where they want to learn to field the ball. Here, you want to lay the hand flat down on the ground. This hand comes in over the ball on top of it. Reach for the ball, field it, put this hand on top of the ball, and then bring it into your body. After the player reaches out and gets the ball, The top hand goes on the ball, and as she's bringing it into her body, she wants to work to make sure she has a good grip. Remember, most errors occur because of a bad grip. A little extra time in making sure we have the ball firmly into the hand will make up for it with a good solid throw. After we bring the ball up, we want to make sure we stay buried with the ball as long as we need to make sure our feet are in the proper position before we throw. The quicker all that happens, the better it's going to be. A common mistake players will make is they'll let the ball roll in too far and they'll attempt to field the ball too far back in their stance with their fingers down. The player needs to learn to reach out for the ball as far as they can and bring it up to them. One of the drills that we use the most in teaching players how to do that is a drill called two knees fielding. There are three basic ready positions. One is for the corners, the first and third baseman. One is for the middle infielders, shortstop and second base, and one is for the outfielders. For the corners, first and third base, you want to be as low as you can be, both arms outstretched, with your glove very close to the ground or on the ground itself. For shortstop and second base, you want to have your hands hang generally in the area of your knees. And the outfield ready position is relaxed, standing more upright with your hands hanging more at your belt. Those are the three basic ready positions. The footwork used by infielders is the same for each position on a force out and a tag play. Using first base as an example, when we're going to take throws at a base on a force out, you want the player to simply go back to the bag, whatever bag it is, straddle the base in the direction the ball is coming from. So in this case, the ball's coming from third base. I've squared up to the base and straddled the bag. When the player releases the ball, I'm going to put my right foot, because I'm right-handed, on the base with the ball of my foot on the base. Wait for the release of the ball and stretch out to receive the ball with two hands. If the throw is coming from the shortstop area, I'm going to square up to the ball, put my right foot on the base, and stretch out toward the bag. If you're using beginning players, they may have difficulty finding the bag quickly, in which case, have the younger player run up to the bag and simply put their right foot on the base first. Then, after the player releases the ball to her, then she stretches out. A common error will be that the player stretches out before the ball is thrown, and then when it's thrown errant, she's unable to move to get it. It's critical that the players understand that no matter where the ball is thrown, the player must leave the base to get it first if necessary. As with each of the positions, the player wants to turn and run to the bag, opening up toward the infield. With footwork on a tag play, similarly, the player opens up and goes back to the base. She wants to then, as if this was third base, she wants to square up to where the source of the ball is, catch the ball with two hands, and go down for the tag. The player needs to take half the base away, giving the outside part of the base for the sliding player. Some people like to teach straddling the bag or playing behind it to avoid a collision. I don't like to teach that because we're giving up too much of the base. I always teach take half the bag away, giving your opponent the outer half, and forcing them to the outside. So in this case, we would reach for the ball, catch it, go down for the tag, and then stay on the infield part of the field. There are two different ways to teach the third baseman to go back to the bag with runners on. With the runner on third base, as I'm demonstrating now, the third baseman turns her back to the infield as the runner gets her line, and she must make sure that her glove stays on this side toward the catcher. The player does not want to allow the runner to get in front of her with the throw, because then the ball could hit the runner before it gets to the fielder. She needs to go back to the bag with the runner, keeping her glove on that side. With the runner on second base, the third baseman always opens up toward the infield, goes back to the bag, takes half the bag away, and waits for the throw. Make sure that the player does not turn her back to the infield with runners on first or second base. In teaching the double play footwork from the shortstop side, there are a couple of different ways you can do it. If the ball is thrown from the foul line on the back side, if the ball is coming from the back side, the shortstop wants to come around, approach the bag, place her left foot across the bag, catch the ball with two hands, turn, and as she's turning, catch the back corner of the bag, replant her feet, and then throw. If the player is coming from the infield side, or the ball is coming from the infield side, there are a couple of different ways you can use the footwork. The most basic and simple way to do it would be to have the player come over, put her left foot on the bag, catch the ball, come back, turn her body, and throw to first. An advanced method that some players might like to use or try would have the shortstop come around the back a little bit, approaching the ball this way, put the left foot out in front of the bag and to the infield side of the base, catch and kick with the back foot, replanting and throwing to first base.
2-2. 2-2.
There are two primary ways to take the double play from the second base side. The first way, which occurs most, when the second baseman is there in advance, she's simply going to come over to the bag, approaching the direction of the ball. She is going to place her left foot on the bag, stretch out with her right, catch the ball, step off, and she's already in position to turn the double play.
2-2. 2-2.
The other way is when the player is late getting to the bag, she's simply going to approach from the same direction to where the source of the ball is. She's going to come to the bag, place her left foot on the bag, catch, push back, and then throw. In both cases, you'll notice either that she's here and here, she's out away from the base path. so she won't have to get out of the way of the sliding runner. On the other side, she's here, have her push back far enough so she doesn't get in the way of the sliding player.
2-2. 2-2.
There are several different types of throws that the second baseman needs to learn to make the throw back to second base. As you can see, I've drawn on the field some lines to section off the field. Anytime a player has the ball within 5 feet of any base, they should always get the out themselves. The last thing you want is the ball this close is to have a miscommunication with who's going to take the throw. If the ball is hit anywhere in this circle or this close to the bag, the fielder should take the out themselves. In this section here, the player needs to learn what we call a simple backhand flip. Here, after the player received the ball this close to the bag, she's simply going to lift up her elbow and flip the ball to second base. Couple of important keys with the backhand flip. Number one, she stays bent and over the ball while she lifts her elbow straight up. Don't have the player stand up and then attempt the flip. The next thing is the player should come up and lock her elbow out and then throw the ball. This keeps the ball at a standard height going to second and prevents an overthrow by swinging the arm like this. Come up and then flip it. Moving to the next section, there are 2 different ways to throw the ball back to second base when we're in this general area. One way is to simply field the ball, come up and do a shoulder turn, pivoting the feet, and make a throw. Field the ball, shoulder turn, throw. The other way would be to field the ball and do a 180 with your feet so that you're in position to make a good strong throw to second base. Some players might not be strong enough for the shoulder turn and they need to come all the way around. Many players, when introduced with this skill, will come up and only get halfway around, or they'll be very slow and methodical with it. The quicker the feet, the better the play. And lastly, for a ball that's hit deep in the hole for the second baseman, she's going to come over to this side, field the ball, reverse plant, and she's in perfect position to make the throw. The player should not attempt to field and come all the way around if she's going and moving that hard into the hole. Simply field it, reverse plant, and throw. Outfielders need to learn a slightly different way of throwing. They have much further distances to throw, so we need to do a couple of things differently technique-wise. Basically, they need to get momentum into the throw and have a much longer lever with their arm, whereas infielders need a shorter arm to throw. Here, we can see that the player uses all of her body to throw. She's going to receive the ball and make sure she uses a nice long backswing and then breaks her back and follows through. The outfielder, after throwing, should not end up standing straight up and down. If she did, she didn't use enough of her body into the throw. It's also important that the player really uses four-seam rotation throwing so that the ball will have back spin on it and carry farther. There are three basic ways an outfielder fields a ground ball. The first way, the most conservative way and the safest way, is what we call down and block. Here the player takes her right knee, rotates it down to the ground, and she brings the ball up, looking the ball in and using two hands. As the player gets stronger, she won't physically touch the ground with her knee, it'll just come close to the ground. The second way an outfielder fields a ground ball is just like an infielder fields it. This would be used for when an outfielder is trying to throw to a base, but not such a risky situation like the game winner. It's just a routine ground ball, but there's runners on base, so she wants to get the ball in more quickly than with the down and block. Here, the outfielder uses exactly the same technique as an infielder would use. Make sure you reach out for the ball, use two hands, and look it in hard. The final technique for an outfielder is to use what we call on the charge. This technique has the most risk for the player to mishandle the ball, but also the quickest way to get the ball in. We like to teach our outfielders to use this technique whenever there's a game winner situation occurring, where we have to get the out or the game would be over. Notice here, the player reaches down with her glove with one hand. Also, her head must go down with the ball as well. She puts the ball out on her front foot, comes up and throws all in one motion. As you can see, this is risky because if the outfield is rough or it hits something, the ball can easily jump over her glove and get by her. Ideally, you'd like the outfielder to catch each fly ball in the proper position to make a good throw. That position would be with your left foot slightly in front of your right and the ball caught on your throwing side. This way, all you would have to do is catch the ball, step, and throw. Many outfielders will it's good enough to just catch the ball wherever it is, but you want to catch the ball in position to make a good throw, since the difference between being safe and out in the infield can be only that quick. Notice here how the player had to sprint over to the spot and get around the ball, surrounding it in the direction that she wanted to throw it. It's not good enough to simply just catch it on the wrong side of her body if she needs to make a throw back to the infield. Catching is obviously a critical position on the field. There are several factors to keep in mind when selecting a catcher. Most importantly, you need to have a player that really wants to be the catcher. Sometimes it doesn't always have to be the biggest, strongest person that makes a good catcher, or the catcher with the strongest arm. More importantly, if they have the proper attitude and a quick arm with quick feet, they'll be every bit as good as the bigger catcher. We're going to cover all the aspects of catching here, starting with the basic setup and stance and receiving the ball. In the basic setup and stance, what you're looking for here is weight evenly distributed. You want the glove outstretched, not too far so it's a stiff arm, but not so far back that it comes into her body. Also, the catcher wants to try to make herself as small as possible so the umpire has a good view of the pitch. Many times a player, in their attempt to get rid of the ball quickly with a runner on base, will shift their weight too high on the pitch, which blocks the view of the umpire trying to get the ball or strike called first. The catcher needs to receive the ball first and then get in position to throw the ball. The important thing to remember when giving signals for the catcher is to make sure their knees are not so wide that the opposing coaches can get the signal. And you want the hand as far back as you can, just gently hanging off. Make sure that when you give a signal, the fingers are straight down so the pitcher can clearly see, as well as the other defensive players can see what the pitch is being called. In teaching a catcher how to frame pitches, it's important to remember that the goal is to not try to make a ball look like a strike. It's simply to make close pitches look more like strikes. The last thing you want to do as a catcher is to take a ball and yank it in to make it look like a strike. Immediately the umpire will suspect that you're trying to make pitches look good, and then he's less likely to